Okay, let's dive into the second subsection that focuses on Python and all the different functions that are very useful in this course. Here you can see the Python course. We'll click on that. We have already gone through the first three, and now we're going to dive into a lesson focused on Python lists and what you can do with them. So if you click on the tutorial here, it will take you and open a Kaggle notebook. I've done that already. So let's dive into this notebook to cover what Python lists are. So a Python list is, you can see here, is a variable that is assigned a set of values, in this case, 2, 3, 5, and 7. And to create a list, you simply put those objects or those items in a list with commas and brackets at each end of the statement in order to create a list. So if we execute this list, nothing happens because we basically just put that into the code, into the Python engine. To see what's inside this list, let's go ahead and click on this plus code, which creates a new cell here. This is a new thing that we can learn how to do, is to add new cells to these Kaggle notebooks. And I'll go ahead and say print primes, and I'll execute that. So you can actually see what's inside of that list. With notebooks, Jupyter notebooks and Kaggle notebooks and other types of notebooks, you don't have to always put the print statement. The print statement is actually implied. So you can just put primes and get the same thing. So you can put all different kinds of things in lists. You can put, in this case, integers 2, 3, 5, and 7. Here we have a list full of the names of planets from Mercury to Neptune. If we execute that, it works. We could also see what's inside that by just saying here, planets, executing, and you can see what's inside that list. You can also make lists of lists. So in this case, you're making what's called nested lists, and you can do that and see that you've made this JQK list, 222, 6AK inside of brackets, each one, and then each of those inside of another set of brackets. And if we see what that looks like here, you can see that it looks basically the same. A list can also, in addition to strings and floats and the different types of data types, you can put different kinds of types in the same list. So here you can see we've created a list called My Favorite Things. We'll go ahead and type that out. You might have noticed that My Favorite Things was completed. I click when you're on the keyboard, you can actually use the tab key to autocomplete, which is what I just did. And you can see here that My Favorite Things includes a number 32, raindrops on roses, a string, and even the object help. So within a Python list, you can actually do what's called indexing. You can actually pull out individual items out of that list. With the planets list that we just created, perhaps we want to see what that first item in that list is. And to do that, we can use brackets after the name of the list. In this case, we're going to use 0 to get the first item. Python is what's called a zero-based indexing language, which means that when we want the first item, we use 0. When we want the second item, we use 1, and etc. Here we can see we can pull out that first item in the list, which is Mercury, the planet Mercury, which is a string. We can get the second closest planet by using 1. So planets 1, you get Venus here. And which is the planet furthest from the sun? So to get the last item in the list, you can use -1, which you see here is Neptune. And the second to last, you can use -2, Uranus. Another useful thing that you can do with lists is you can do what's called slicing. You can actually cut off certain parts of the list and only grab certain sequences of items in that list. In this case, with planets, we want to pull out items index 0 to index 3. And what that's going to do is pull out the first 3 items, Mercury, Venus, and Earth, the first 3 items. If we want to pull out all of the items below the first 3 items, we can do that too. This is the same thing. If you don't actually need to specify what the first one is, we can pull out all of the items out of the list that come after the third item of Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. We can also use negative indices when slicing. So you can pull out all of the items in the list after the first and before the last. So if we do that here, Venus through Uranus, or you can pull out the last 3 planets in this case. So in Python, lists are actually what's called mutable objects, which means that you can change the items that are in that list by just overriding them. So here, for example, is our planets list. We're going to change the third index or the fourth item, which is Mars. We're going to change it to a new object called Malacandra. So here you can see we've done that. It says here, wow, that's quite a mouthful. So let's compensate by shortening the names of the first three planets. Here you can see that we can override the first three items in the list to Mur, V, and instead of what we had there. And we printed that so you can see what that name is. And then, oh, that's silly. So let's give them their names back, which we overwrote back to that original names of Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. So lists have what's called functions that are specific to understanding what's inside a list, the objects in the list, the length and the ability to sort and things like that. So here are the most important of those functions. len in parentheses with the name of the list inside the parentheses is going to give you the length of that, the number of items in that list. Sorted is a way to take the items in the list and sort them according to whatever data type they are. In this case, these are strings. It's going to sort them in alphabetical order from Earth to Venus. Sum is a situation where if you have integers or float data types or numbers, you can sum those up. In this case, you've got 2, 3, 5, and 7 in your list. You're summing that up to 17. Previously, we showed how min and max can be used. And you can also do the same thing with lists. If you have a list of prime numbers, you can get the maximum or the minimum from that. In the middle of this lesson, there is what they call an interlude, where they're going to give you a bit of information about Python objects. An object is basically many of the things that we've talked about within Python are objects. And objects allow you to apply what's called methods to those objects using the name of the object that you've created and then dot and then some sort of method that can be applied. For example, here's an example where x is equal to 12. You're creating a number or an object called x that has the number 12 assigned to it. And .imag is a method that's being applied to that object 12. So in this case, you're getting the imaginary component of the number 12, which is 0. Here you're getting, if you're creating this new number that it's a float and it has an imaginary object component, you're calling that out using .imag. So there are other types of methods for Python, .bit length. In this case, this is really showing you that when you call a method, sometimes you need to use parentheses to call it in order for it to work properly. Here you can see that when you call .bit length on the object X, nothing happened. You get this kind of like obscure feedback, but when you use parentheses for that method, then you get the number 4, which is what you expect. Once again, using the help function is quite useful if you want to learn more about how these methods work and a little bit of information about those methods. Now that you have an understanding of due to that last subsection, what methods are, that's a definition that's been made of what methods are. Let's talk about the methods that you can apply to list objects that are really useful. First one is the one I use all the time to add new objects to a list, which is the .append method. So here you can see we had that list of planets before. We're using the .append method. We're going to add Pluto into that list. When I was growing up, Pluto was considered a planet, and that's what we're saying here in the comment. Pluto is a planet, darn it. Let's add it to that list. So when you add planets to that list, what you're going to get is a new list. So let's take a look, planets, and you can see here that Pluto is now at the end of the list. If you want to learn more about what the append function does, you can use the help function. And here you can see another representation of that list that we just created. You can see here Pluto's at the end. So here's another function for lists called .pop. .pop is used to remove the last item of the list and return that item. Here you can see that we've popped out Pluto back out of the list. And if we rerun and show that list, we're going to see that Pluto is not at the end of the list anymore. Another thing you can do is to search lists. If we want to find Earth in our list, we can try to find the index. So you can do planets.index, and .index is a method for lists where we give it what we're looking for, .earth, and it tells us the index that we're looking for. We can also see where Pluto is. Oh, that's right. We don't have Pluto not in the list anymore. We get an error. This error message is red. This is one of the first errors that we've seen and talked about. And you can see in the text of this lesson where it talks about what is an error and how we use that. We can use the in operator to see what's in a list. Is Earth in planets? That's true. Is the word or is the planet Calbafrax, I don't even know how to pronounce that, is that in planets? That is false. And once again, the help function will help us understand what is inside the list and all the different functions or methods that can be applied to it. Tuples at the end, the tuples are almost exactly the same as lists. The only big difference is that they are immutable. You cannot change. Once you've created a tuple, you can't change what's inside of it. And to create tuples, to instantiate tuples, you use parentheses instead of brackets. So here you can see a new tuple created, 1, 2, and 3. If we try to change something, one of the items in that tuple, you're going to get an error. Tuple object does not support item assignment. So it's not the same as a list. Here, there's a few little other examples. We'll skip over those. You can read more about what those are. Last thing is, for this particular lesson, you can go and check out the exercise, which is a coding challenge to solidify your understanding of lists.